I won a New York City basketball championship. And when I come off the court, my friends are holding me on up in the air, exalting me on their shoulders. They put me down in front of my dad and I say, "Hey, Pop, what do you think?" And his only response was, "Well, your attitude still needs adjusting." And I went and I tried to take my life that day with drugs.
Welcome back to the Salem Speakers Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Today's guest is someone whose life's journey spans far more than health, fitness, and wellness. Michael Sena has spent decades as a fitness expert, entrepreneur, author, inventor, television personality, corporate wellness leader, and most importantly, as we're on the Salem Speakers Podcast, a successful speaker as well. He's worked with Fortune 100 companies. He's reached millions through television and media, authored books, launched products, and built businesses. But what makes his story remarkable isn't the success, it's his journey, because behind the accomplishments is a story of adversity, reinvention, faith, resilience, and the pursuit of purpose. Michael, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Jacob, thanks for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I look forward to speaking with you today, sir.
Awesome. Well, before we talk about your career, I'd love to start really back at the beginning, right? I want to learn about where your story starts. You know, you've talked openly about growing up in the Bronx. So let's start there. What was life growing up?
Well, I think a great segue is to start with the fact that the New York Knicks finally won a basketball championship the other day.
Woo!
I was 13 years old the last time that happened. So God is good, and we're very happy with celebrating. But yeah, I grew up in the Bronx, in an apartment on Edison Avenue in Pelham Bay Park. Very small. My father was an attorney, but he was, just making his bones, his way about him. 7 years old, we moved to a beautiful, very quaint community called City Island. And City Island is known for its seafood, its shipbuilding, and a very, very tight-knit community, a mile long, half a mile wide. We lived in the water. We lived in the water all summer. Winters were brutal and so forth, but even though you felt like you were in a New England nautical town, it was still the tough streets of New York because people came onto the island that didn't live there and they brought certain elements with them. And then, as I started to play sports, you started to go into other neighborhoods in the Bronx that were very different from ours. And, things happened, lessons were learned, things were achieved. Success, failure, what have it, and the grind between humanity. My spirituality, my belief in Jesus was always very, very strong. St. Mary's Star of the Sea was at the beginning of the island, went to grade school there, and then, of course, played basketball for them. But it was really a special place that was kind of in a corner, but it was certainly the Bronx. And I played ball in the South Bronx, and that's infamously a very, very tough area of the Bronx.
So as a young man, and you and I had the privilege of completing a one-on-one coaching call prior to this, which I was so honored to spend some time with you, learn a little bit about your background, your story, and where we're headed. But what were some of those challenges as a young man in the Bronx, growing up in the Bronx, that you had to face and that you had to overcome and deal with?
There were two fronts I was combating. I was fighting. The first was out on the street. I was a very skinny kid. I was very pickable. You could pick on me, because I didn't have any prowess to me. I had certain friends that even at a young age they did, but I didn't. So there was a lot of bullying going on. There was also a lot of racism. If you were a person of color and you were in my neighborhood, we knew you didn't belong there. And we knew you were coming to steal a bike or what have you. Same thing if I went into a particular neighborhood that white people just didn't live in. So there was a heavy shroud of racism, but also even among friends, there was, we were very competitive with each other, very sports minded. And there was a lot of infighting, if I could say, because we were family, but there was a lot of infighting. And then the element of drugs was very heavy then. I mean, the older guys, you would see them in the park at times, strung over or strung out, I say, hung over from, shooting heroin. That was a big thing back in the 70s. I got into smoking marijuana at a very young age. It wasn't an experiment. It was, hey, my buddies were doing it. Hey, you want to do this? And it was almost a therapeutic thing because the other front that I had to fight with was going home to my father. My father was a real disciplinarian. My father was a very successful attorney. We weren't rich. He was a straight arrow type of a guy, very respected in the profession. But for some reason, my dad, I don't know how he looked at me, 4 therapists later, and
Yeah.
their conclusion is that my father was uncomfortable with me going down the path that I was going. Some say he was jealous. When I hear that, I go crazy, Jacob. I go, how does a father be jealous of his son? But it's
Yeah.
been also explained to me that maybe he was uncomfortable or jealous of you were rogue. You didn't fit into the mold. You didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. You didn't want to do what you were told you had to do. And actually lived my life that way the whole time. I don't break the law, but I was never a 9 to 5er as I grew up. I always
Yeah.
worked for myself, but I also stood out in my neighborhood. And, when disco showed up and I wanted to start to investigate and dance, all my friends were all rock and rollers, beer drinkers, pot smokers, and they didn't want to go. And they were like, Sena, why are you going there? I go, boy, it feels great. You go out and you start to dance. And I became a very good dancer after that. So I always, the prodigal son, so to speak, I always went out of my neighborhood and broke away, but I always came back and I was always one of the guys anyway. But
Yeah.
there were two fronts I was fighting: the street and my home.
Do you have any moments, and it's okay if the answer is no to this because we haven't talked about it previously, but are there any moments that you can, commit from memory or pull from memory that had you made a different decision, they would have sent your life in a completely different direction?
Yeah, lots of them. If I would have listened to my father, I would have
Yeah.
I would have gone a whole different path. But
Yeah.
I just felt I had to cut my own way. I'll tell you what, I got out of college, I became a bodybuilder, I started
Nice.
competing. I didn't go get a job right away. And then some of my college buddies had started selling penny stocks.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
back in the day, though, yeah,
Yeah.
they're listed, they're legal,
Yeah.
but the process is not always morally correct. So my father said to me, Michael, I got my Series 7, very tough test to pass, but I got it on the second try. And he says, you could go to Wall Street and get an honorable career, or you could go to this penny stock market, end up with a subpoena in your back pocket. Well, I ended up with 2 subpoenas in my back
Hmm.
pocket, not from my doing, from the company I worked for. It was that time in my life, Jacob, that I said, you know what? I'm not working for anybody ever again because I'm not going to take me down an illegal path. So I always had Jesus was always close to me. My spirituality was very close to me, saying, Michael, this is a moral decision correctly, and this is an immoral decision incorrectly. But my father, unbeknownst to him, Wall Street is as crooked as they come. It's
Right.
not like they're a bunch of straight shooters either. So, but that was the decision I made, and that was a lot of heartache because I ended up going bankrupt. Um, and if it wasn't for Tony Robbins, with my last credit card and for $139 that passed, he actually saved me from, what was eventually my third attempt of taking my own life because
Wow.
I was really devastated at my loss. I said, I've got all this potential. How am I at the age of 29, 30? How am I broke?
Yeah.
How did this happen? I watched them tow a Cadillac away, a Mercedes Benz away. I had paid all my taxes. I had no debt, but I had a closet full of $1,000 suits and $700 shoes, and we were making great money. I didn't do anything wrong, but the company did. So
Yeah.
that was a real fork in the road that I probably would never left New York, would have stayed there, and would have probably followed a different path that way. So that's a story that comes to mind.
Well, I love that. The next question on my line, which you already answered, was going to be who was somebody who influenced you the most during those times? And you already shouted out Mr. Tony Robbins, who has changed millions and millions of
Yeah.
people's lives. And I love what you even said is you actually made the investment. So I think you said $139, right? Is that what you said, to go to one of his events?
Personal Power was the
Okay.
program. Was on cassette tape. But I got
Wow.
to tell you the prelude to that.
Yes.
So here I am following the very people my father said they're going to get you down the wrong path. You're going to get subpoenas. And a college buddy of mine, Vinny Comerford, God rest his soul, became a professional bodybuilder. And we were going to Mr. Olympia in Chicago at the
Awesome.
McCormick Hotel. Yeah.
Yes.
So we were stockbrokers. We had already gotten shut down from the one company. And I had 6 credit cards. I'll never forget. And at one time I had $180,000, $200,000 worth of credit. So we go to this hotel. We hadn't had money come in for a while. And I go to the McCormick Hotel. We're checking in. The lobby's filled with people. I give the young girl my credit card. She was new at the job, you could tell. I give her my credit card. She said, "Sir, this credit card doesn't work, but just wait here 1 second." She goes into the back office. So she comes out and she says, "My manager says I have to cut this credit card in half."
Oh,
I
wow.
said, "Really?" I said, "Okay, try this one." Same thing happened. The credit service was telling the girl at the computer, "Cut that card in half and throw it away." On the third credit card, the manager came out and said, "Sir, I am sorry, but these credit cards are bad." I ended up giving them 5 credit cards. They cut
Wow.
every one in half.
Wow.
I was broke. My friends are laughing at me. I'm getting embarrassed, sweat's dripping down my face. And the lesson of my father started to hit me.
Yeah.
I said I should have listened to him because there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
I go home. I never took out the 6th credit card. My friends paid for my room.
Okay.
I go down. I'm sitting. I sold the furniture out from underneath me. I'm living in the Water Street Grill in Rochester, above one of the greatest restaurants. I used to have food sent up all the time when I had money. Now I had no money. I'm sitting in a beanbag chair, watching a black and white TV on a tomato milk crate. Hand to God.
Wow.
I am depressed. I'm on the 6th floor. I'm thinking about just going right out that window. Tony Robbins commercial comes on, personal power. And this guy's enthusiasm was like, "Oh, no, look at this guy. He looks like he's my age." And he is. He looks like he's my age. And he's as happy as happy.
Hmm.
He's this success. I go, "What the heck's going on?" $139. I go, "I got no money." I grabbed the 6th credit card that was in my wallet. It never should have worked, Jacob.
And it worked.
Never. I
Hmm.
looked up at God. I said, "God, please." The thing went through. I got the 30-day personal power program. And I'm telling you, that changed my life at 31 years old.
That's awesome. I love
Yeah.
stories like that. You were at the lowest of low, willing to still make an investment. And I think it's goes to the testament in the quote, "Those who pay attention." And that was
Right.
literally
Yeah.
your last available any dollar at all, right? Your last funds that you could spend on anything. So you invested it, and I bet you invested a lot of time, energy, and effort then in that program once you had it, right?
Yeah. Never missed the tape. Did it more than once. Have his quotes forever. One of the famous quotes I learned is, "Try something, doesn't work, try something else, doesn't work, try something else, doesn't work, try."
Yeah, that's
And
right.
yet all my family and friends, my whole life, "What are you doing? Stick to one thing. You
Hmm.
can't, you're so unstable. You're this and that." I'm like, that's not me. And I'm listening. I
Yeah.
got Tony Robbins here. I go, who am I going to listen to? My family, everybody barely pays their bills. And then you got this guy who's so successful. So I was rogue my whole life, Jacob. I went, I knew
Yeah.
I had God on my side. And I said, I'm going to do this my way and I'm going to make it because I got great work ethic. And I just know the path that's ahead of me is going to eventually work out someday.
I love it. No, I love that, right? So that actually sets me up really well. So one of the themes that seems to keep showing up in your life and in your story is this concept of intensity, right? Intensity, drive, determination, a refusal to quit. Do you actually know where that came from, or is that just innate?
No, I know exactly where it came from. Although my family has a great work ethic, my dad, God rest his soul, he did work till he was 81 years old. He was a trial attorney. And when they told him he had stage 4 cancer, that was it. But he went to work every day and then he did stuff always on the weekends. But it was from bodybuilding, Jacob. When I became a bodybuilder, my mother will recommend this. I went to college. I was very skinny. I was playing basketball. I got 3 scholarships to college, but they didn't impress me. I was very down on my basketball coach. I was down on my father. I was down on everybody. I had a real bad negative attitude.
Yeah.
I go to college and my 3 roommates are big dudes. And I'm like, oh my God. And my mother used to call me, I look like a dirty Q-tip. She goes, "You're straight up and down like a Q-tip, but your black hair makes it look like a dirty Q-tip. You're so skinny." And I just went into the gym and I never came out since. And that structure, especially when you compete, and I became a competitor, man, when it comes down to eating, you've got to eat a certain way. You come off that beaten path or that specific path, it shows in your body immediately. So
Yeah.
the slightest deviation of following the rules made you look terrible. And by the way, the first show I ever did, I broke down the Tuesday before. I went down. I was still living in my house. I went down. I ate a pot of pasta and peas, and the sodium blew me up, and all my cuts smoothed it out. And you see pictures of me, and I got a frown on my face. I'm so disappointed in myself. I said, this will never happen again. And I became an expert competitor. I won my class in the Eastern USA. And then I won the my class in the Mr. Westchester. And those were big shows in New York City. So bodybuilding and showing up every day, consistency over time equals results.
That's
And
right.
that's a mantra I use. You use it. You're
That's
successful.
right.
You do the same thing. We have to show up every day or things don't go the way we're hoping they will.
That's right.
So bodybuilding, yeah.
Well, you went on to accomplish so much, right? Things that most people just dream about: national television, corporate leadership, entrepreneurship, publishing, speaking. Looking back at all these things, was there one that really stood out most to you as one that meant the most to you?
Oh boy, that's great. Well, you know, turning myself into a hulk of a man. I was 6'2", 275 pounds. And I got a lot of attention from that. Just walking in a room, didn't have to say a word. In fact, on my first interview, when I finally stopped bodybuilding, I went into a Names in the News with Henry DeSciulio. It was the vice president. He interviewed me, and all he wanted to do was speak about the size of my arms because I filled a jacket like there was nobody's business. It was going into the fitness world full time, not as a bodybuilder, as a personal trainer.
Hmm.
And I started because I changed my life, Jacob. I started to change. I wanted to change other people's lives. I wasn't even thinking about the money as much as I wanted because I knew what that felt like.
Yeah.
And I had a great deal of success changing other people's lives. And I remember one time, Paul Conrad was the new weather forecaster for WGN Channel 9. And he came to me, he says, Michael, my father just passed away from lymphoma. I'm going to go run in the Dublin Marathon. Would you train me for it? I said, let me think about it, Paul. Thought about it. And I said, this is my avenue to get on television. I said, Paul, I'll train you for free. I says, if you, number one, take me to Dublin with you and make me a part of the TV package. And number two, get me a interview with your producer to bring me on the show. People don't know how to work out in the gym. And
Yeah.
sure enough, he thought about it. He said, you got a deal. And I went to Dublin Island with them. We were on these live telecasts, great. And then he got me, Steve Ramsey was the producer's name. I'll never forget him.
Yeah.
And he looked at it, and this is what he said to me, Jacob. Words I'll never forget. He goes, do you have any television experience? I said, no, not. I figured, man, I was that bad. He goes, you're going to be a star someday.
That's awesome.
I looked at Paul. Paul shook his head like this. I go, really? He goes, you got something special here. And I was on television for the next 10 years on live television. And according to NBC, my 15-minute segment had the highest ratings of the rest of the news program.
Wow.
So the business of fitness opened up doors, television for 10 years. Then I hired a business deal maker, a business manager. And he brought me to United Airlines. United Airlines showed me over dinner an article that British Airways had a passenger come off the plane, developed a deep vein thrombosis, didn't know it, went for a massage. It got massaged up, turned into a pulmonary embolism,
Hmm.
and she died.
Wow.
And British Airways paid like, I don't know, $16 million. So the media company took me and my business manager out and said, we don't want this to happen to us. And that's how I got on United Airlines, giving in-flight tips to the travelers, 3 to 5 million people a month.
Yeah.
I wrote articles in Hemispheres magazine, and
Yeah.
I started hearing from friends I haven't heard from in years. So it opened up my world, it opened up my life, and fitness for 37 years really put me on the map of feeling accomplished to help people grow and feel what I felt, which was just an amazing feeling of life.
You keep teeing me up really well for the next thing. And as we start to wind this thing down, I'm actually going to, be the first to release a little bit of information out to the universe, which is writing. You mentioned you were writing then, you're writing now, and you let me know that you're writing a book called Rage. Are you willing to share a little bit with our listeners about your forthcoming book?
Sure. Hopefully I'll fight back the emotions because every time I talk about it, it's a tough thing. As I mentioned earlier to you, Jacob, I was battling two fronts as a child, the street and my father, my home life. The name of the book is Rage, Born in the Bronx, Raised in the Streets, Saved by My Faith. And as I mentioned before, I had 2 attempts to take my own life because I
Yeah.
couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't process it. And even though I had great friends on the street, they didn't know there was no opening up. I couldn't, they weren't therapeutic, and something about Italians, by the way. And this was depicted in The Sopranos when Tony Soprano had to go and finally get a therapist. It was like, don't you tell anybody. It
Yeah.
was an
Right.
embarrassment. It was a weakness. I've been writing this story in my life for years. And basically, it talks about um, my faith, how it saved me, the heartache that I experienced with my dad, the not understanding why can't he ever say good job, son? Uh, I was 15 years old and I won a New York City basketball championship out of the 5 boroughs. That's not easy to do. There are
Right.
so many NBA stars that are in the New York area, and I won it single handedly. I scored 30 points. I hit foul shots in double overtime, and when I come off the court, my friends are holding me on up in the air, exalting me on their shoulders. They put me down in front of my dad, and I say, "Hey, Pop, what do you think?" And his only response was, "Well, your attitude still needs adjusting."
Hmm.
And I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
And when I tried to take my life that night with
Wow.
drugs, because I just said, if I can't make this is my father on earth,
Yeah.
but it was my father above that saved me. And
Hmm.
I didn't know it at that time because what I took that night, Jacob, I should have been dead. I
Yeah.
should have been dead, and I wasn't. And so this is what the book's about. It's about triumph, it's about failure, it's about up, it's about down, how to
Yeah.
process it. The streets, I couldn't get out of the streets until I moved out of New York, which I was 34 years old when I finally did. But it also is to teach others lessons. Maybe they have a relationship like this. Maybe they're having challenges, or maybe they did. I'm not the only son that's ever had trouble, a
That's right.
challenge with their father. It's almost common more often than it's not. But um, these are some of the stories. And then I became the stockbroker in the boiler room, and then a bouncer, and then I worked in the most famous nightclub in the world at that time called the
Yeah.
Limelight, and the people I met and the encounters I had. So it brings you through this, but all along the way, there's a lesson I share. And that lesson is you could go this way or you could go that way. I chose to go that way a lot, and I got the lumps for it,
Yeah.
but it built character, right? Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I am a product of that, but I want to help people. There's an easier road in life.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to read it. I'm excited for you to finish that up and get it out to the universe. And Michael, I
Thank you.
want to thank you. Thank you so much for being here. One thing that stands out to me is that your story reminds us that life isn't about avoiding adversity. It's about what we do with it. It's about taking every challenge and every setback and every failure and every success and allowing it to shape us into who we're meant to be. And for everyone listening today, I need you to remember this as we've heard. Your past does not define your future. Your setbacks do not define you. And your next chapter may be your most important one yet. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Salem Speakers Podcast. We'll see you next time.